Land's governance system.
Hello and welcome to Shaka Extra Time. My name is Jackson Vunganyi and I'm here with Peter Clody sitting in for Shaka Sally. I'm sitting in for Paul Ndiho. Peter will be answering your questions, questions that you submitted online. Peter, how are you today?
I'm well, thank you. How are you,
Good to see you. Good to have you again on the show today. So let's start a couple of big stories happening on the continent. Let's start off in Norway, where Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed of Ethiopia is currently receiving his 2019 Nobel Peace Prize. Let our listeners know, our viewers know, why he's receiving this very much coveted prize.
Well, the Nobel Peace Prize is a big deal for any recipient, and for Abiy Ahmed, the Prime Minister of Ethiopia, it is a big deal because Ethiopia and Eritrea had been at each other's throat, basically at war. Although there is peace among them, they have been at war. So brokering that peace deal was a diplomatic masterstroke for him, and he came out, made a whole lot of changes in Ethiopia.
Internal changes reforms,
in Ethiopia,
yes,
right.
Yes.
Now, apart from that, the diplomatic gesture that he made towards Eritrea eased the tension between the two neighbors. Basically, they eat the same food, same people, as
same
people
culture.
Right.
Right.
You know, so that eased tension in the entire Horn of Africa region. It created some political stability and peace within the region, and borders that have been closed between Ethiopia and Eritrea were suddenly opened. Abiy Ahmed went to Eritrea as part of the gesture. And then you have Isaias Afwerki also going to Ethiopia after more than 20 years.
Yes,
you know,
yes,
so it is a significant step. So the international community saw the gesture he has made, and the peace somewhat has been maintained or restored between Ethiopia and Eritrea. It was obvious that he was the obvious choice. So it is a big deal, not only for Ethiopia, but for the entire African continent.
But the ceremony itself was not without its own controversy. Prime Minister Ahmed was said that he did not want to speak to, talk to the press.
Right.
Do you know anything about why he had
heard
reservations about speaking to the press?
I've heard a lot of some of his opponents are saying that this is a big deal. This is a platform for which he needs to express his opinions about things ongoing. He also has written a book about synergy, Medemir, as they call it.
Right, his political philosophy.
Right,
Medemir,
so people would think that this is a platform he could use to explain to the international community and to the rest of Africa about the need to transform and have a new way of thinking about embracing the tenets of democracy and unity and synergy and improving the lives of the ordinary African.
Right.
This, they said, is a missed opportunity.
It's a missed opportunity.
Let's see what if he changes his mind in the near future.
Because Ethiopia is only like 6 months away to a very important election in 2020, May of next year. So this would have been a great platform for him to explain his political philosophy, the political philosophy that is that kind of counters that ethnic federalism political philosophy. And but he is still very much a transformational figure, and many agree that he did deserve this. Let's go to South Sudan, a country that we spoke briefly a little bit about. South Sudan rebel leader Riek Machar arrived in Juba today, Tuesday, where he'll be meeting with President Salva Kiir. What is he doing in South Sudan? What is he doing in Juba?
Before coming into the studio, I was speaking with Pog Baluang, who is a spokesman for the SPLM-IO, or the Sudan People's Liberation Movement in opposition. And he was telling me, although he arrived today in Juba, the meeting is scheduled for tomorrow, where he's supposed to interact with President Salva Kiir to find ways of implementing the revitalized peace agreement. We know that despite the extension of the pre-transitional period, the progress hasn't been there as people anticipated. IGAD recently called, IGAD heads of state, a regional bloc, called the two together to try to find ways of implementing the revitalize peace agreement, but it seems things not to be moving smoothly.
So as they come to the end of the 100-day time frame, remember when they said, well, was it a month ago?
Yes, a month ago,
when everybody was like, you know, we kind of doubt if you have not been able to achieve peace in this long, you know, what is 100 days going to do? And now we're coming to the 100-day, you know, deadline. What are some of the sticking issues in this conflict that these people are not able to agree upon?
Right. The main sticking issue is the settling of these armed groups, or the so-called rebels. You know, they have so many of these groups that are going on.
So it's not just the SPLM-IO?
It's not the SPLM-IO. There are other armed groups. So the promise from the central government in Juba, led by President Salva Kiir, is that he's going to provide $1 million that will help in resettling these people and incorporating them into the army.
Into the national army.
Into the national army.
Right.
That has not been met yet, which is dragging on and creating instability. Sometimes you have ordinary people being caught in the crossfires of the tension and the conflict that is ongoing. And that is why IGAD called them to find out what the real problem is, provide the needed funds so things can move forward. As we speak today, the $1 million promised by the central government in Juba has yet to be made possible.
Has not been yet dispersed yet.
So now that the money is not in, things cannot move forward.
Right.
So now the peace deal has stalled.
What's the date today?
Well,
that's the 12, like how many days before the...
We have less than 3 weeks for the expiration of the pre-transitional period, which was extended for 100 days. And that is
it's
why
quite possible that even if they disperse the funds right now, it may have to...
And
so
we
are looking to another extension.
Yes, the whole point is that this pre-transitional period will be hammered out so that there is a transitional government that will be established. So it will lead the country to a peaceful election, and possible election, because the accusations and counter-accusations have been going on for far too long.
Right.
And people who have been affected, unfortunately,
right. Displacement.
That is the problem.
Right.
So you have the international community.
That sense of urgency doesn't seem to filter down to the chief protagonists in this.
Right.
In this
so
conflict.
that is why IGAD, the African Union, and the rest of the international community are saying, hey guys, you need to start working things out, and get things done.
Right. Okay. So Peter, let's move along real quick to Malawi, from Eastern Africa to Southern Africa and Malawi. This is an election you covered well. President Mutharika's re-election 2 months ago, that the opposition challenged in the courts of law. Big ruling coming up very soon. What is that about?
Well, the arguments have ended officially, so the court will now take its time to rule over the challenge by both the UTM, United Transformation Movement, led by former Vice President Saulos Chilima, and then the biggest opposition party, the Malawi Congress Party, led by Dr. Lazarus Chakwera. Now, they challenged the outcome of the election because they thought there were some shenanigans that went on that violated the credibility of the election. Now, they jokingly called the president, who was re-elected, as announced by the Electoral Commission, as a Tipex president. Tipex is the whiteout used to correct mistakes.
Yes,
right.
Yes.
So, in some of the instances,
that they changed
absolutely. In some of the evidence that I have seen that were presented in court, you could see some figures being changed with a whiteout and being written over it.
Wow.
So they said that these were figures that were changed to ensure that President Peter Mutharika wins second full-year term. And that is why they are challenging. Now, it is upon the court to decide whether to invalidate the results of the election and call for re-election, or say that, well, the president has won. And that some of these inconsistencies did not affect the entire election as its own. So even if it is scrapped, the results will still remain. So that is what the court has to decide on.
What is the feeling, based on some of the reporting on this, how is the court going to rule on this? There are some projections or people saying that maybe the opposition presented a very strong case before the judges. I mean, if you think about the TPEX and some of those things. I guess let's start from the fact that how does the Malawi judicial system function? Is it an independent judicial system? How do the courts work?
So far, it has been independent. However, there have been cases where opponents have said the government has leaned on some judges to rule in its favor. However, a critical point came when the government took the HRDC, it's a political pressure group, organizing a series of demonstrations demanding the ouster or firing of Dr. Justice Jane Ansah, the chairperson of the Electoral Commission. They said because she bungled, supposedly, the election, they don't have trust in her to administer future credible election, so they want her out. The government took them to court because of the demonstrations, and the government lost.
Oh.
So that tells you that...
That's, I guess, a positive sign that, there's an independent judiciary that is working.
Yes.
Interesting.
So let's see what happens.
Let's see what happens. We're talking about Malawi, and if you're just joining us, this is Shaka Xtra Time. I'm Jackson Vunganyi, hosting Peter Clotty in for Shaka Sally. So let's move to West Africa.
Right.
Nigeria. Some very disturbing images on the web, viral video of Showore, a person we both know, a reporter, investigative reporter who was detained on charges, I guess treason charges.
Yes.
Court ruled that he should be released. On the day of his release, security stormed the court premises and yanked him out and jailed him again, arrested him again. What is your take on this story? Well, what is happening in Nigeria?
Omoyele Showore was the presidential candidate for an opposition party, challenged President Muhammadu Buhari for his re-election bid. But then, because of how the election went, people doubted the outcome of the presidential election, so he called for a demonstration or a revolt, so to speak. And the government said
a
revolution. So the government said that is a security risk that could plunge Nigeria into a security crisis, and that has to be dealt with. And that is why the Department of State Security, or DSS, took matters into its hands to arrest him. Now, the scenario is that Showore could run away, leave the country if he is released. And that is why the DSS want a surety. So whoever comes up and then this man disappears, that person will be held responsible.
Right.
There is a case where Nnamdi Kanu, the leader of the Biafra or IPOB, was granted similar bail and he absconded. And that, I'm told, embarrassed the state security apparatus. So they supposedly don't want to commit a second offense at this. They don't want to be taken for granted again. And that is why they are ensuring that Showore is dealt with. But I spoke with Showore's lawyer, his name is Femi Falana, who said that a court order is a court order, irrespective of whether you agree with it or not, has to be respected. So they filed a suit.
Right.
They filed a suit against the Director General of the DSS as well as the Attorney General, because the Attorney General, who is in charge of enforcing laws in the country, has not stepped up to the plate.
Has failed in his job, I guess.
Absolutely. And that is why Femi Falana is saying that this appears to be a banana republic, his words, not mine, and that this has to be respected because Nigeria, he said, respected a judgment against the country in a British court. So why is the government not adhering or sticking to the rule by a court? Now, when the agents went into the courtroom, it forced the judge to suspend all activities of the court for that day.
Right.
And that, they said, undermines the very essence of the independence of the Nigerian judiciary.
But what is the subtext in this story? I mean, it doesn't seem to me that, and to many people, that Showore, presents any kind of danger to the Nigerian state. I mean, calling for a revolution. This is a guy who has been very critical of that government for many years, and not just that government, but just of the Nigerian, the subsequent governments. He heads Sahara Reporters, an investigative media organization, does a lot of groundbreaking work in exposing corruption in that country. Is the subtext here that Buhari is going after his, somebody who has been critical of him and his government?
Well, those are same sentiment expressed by supporters of Omoyele Sowore. However, when I spoke with Garba Shehu, who is a spokesman for the president, he said, anywhere in the world, the government will not tolerate anybody that is calling for a revolution, basically to undermine a legitimately elected president in a democracy. That is undermining all the Constitution and subverting the Constitution. So it takes it away from just a mere political stunt to a security issue, because Nigeria has experienced a series of coups d'etats in the 80s and then the 90s. So they don't want to go back. So anybody that threatens the territorial integrity of Nigeria has to be dealt with, and that is what is happening.
So even mere words of saying revolution, that is a threat enough.
Well,
if you're just joining us, this is Shaka Xtra Time. Remember to like the page, subscribe, share, and leave a question and comment. If you have any questions for Peter Clody, leave them on the page below so that we can answer those questions. Peter, let's go to Kenya. We'll go back to East Africa.
Right.
Another story that was, that made a lot of headlines was the flamboyant governor of Kenya's capital. They call him the gold-loving governor of Kenya's capital, Mike Sonko. Character himself was recently charged with 19 counts of graft, corruption. Now, Kenya, I think it was this year when the Minister of Finance,
Henry Rotich.
Yes, he was arrested also. Are we seeing Kenya actually living up to the promise that Kenyatta made to fight corruption? Finally.
President Kenyatta said corruption is a national security threat. So he embarked on the fight against graft. Now, a lot of governance experts in Kenya are telling me that the mere fact that a court has ruled that Sonko should step down from his position as the governor in itself is a win for the fight against corruption, because Kenya has never seen this before, because people in government of positions accused of various financial malfeasances are still occupying positions.
They get away with it.
Right. Now, you even have the issue of the U.S. imposing sanctions on Amos Wako, the former Attorney General, for all kinds of corruption. Although he held a news conference and asked to face his accusers and asked for evidence to be presented so he can challenge it in court, Kenyans are saying this is the first time they are seeing people being held responsible for alleged financial malfeasance. Let's see how this thing pans out.
How do you think it's going to pan out?
Well, it appears that the government has a solid case, and if the...
What are some of the 19 charges that he took money that was meant for public use?
Not only that, contracts were awarded to family and friends that benefit him. And he said, well, these are mere accusations. He could account for every cent. And these contracts run into tens of millions of dollars. And these are family and friends and relations. So those who get the contract, he directly benefits from them. And that is against the Kenyan laws.
The optics in this case are not on the side of Mike Sonko. This is a guy who has cars that are decked in gold. He's a very flamboyant dude. So it's going to be interesting to see how he, he argues his case in court.
But this also goes into President Kenyatta's fight against corruption. If nobody is nailed or prosecuted, and jailed for these, it will not serve as a deterrent. And the man, President Kenyatta, campaigned on it. So if it goes against him, it will be a big blow. Now, if it succeeds, or the government succeeds in prosecuting Sonko, then the fight against corruption is on.
Right. And I think it was, just the fact that his, finance minister was arrested. How many finance ministers have you had on the continent being arrested?
His supporters are saying these are politically motivated, because the finance minister and a deputy official are linked to the deputy president, William Ruto, who is being hounded by people in the Jubilee coalition, the ruling government. So they are saying these are all politically motivated just to make the deputy president look bad ahead of the next general election.
I see that. I see that. All right, so Peter, let's get to some questions here from our viewers and listeners. I will start with this question from Frank Nwamanya from Uganda. This question is, what are your thoughts, Peter, on the decision by former French colonies in West Africa to withdraw from the CFA?
Well, this has been ongoing for a long time because there have been a series of reports where those in French Africa would have to go and borrow money from the Paris Central Bank and all that. Now, I remember in the 1990s, ECOWAS at that time came up with a policy to have one unique currency. It was revived recently. However, some are saying that the French countries seem to undermine that move to have the ECO or the ECO as a single currency across West Africa. Now,
so the ECO would replace the CFA?
Not only CFA, will replace all currencies in West Africa, like the Nigerian Naira and Kobo, the Ghanaian Cedi and Pesos, the Sierra Leonean or Liberian dollar. It will replace everything. So they will have one single currency because West Africa at this moment has one single passport.
Right.
You know, so those in the 18-member region has one single passport. So with
and
that
that's
passport,
a way to create a single marketplace, you know, have a single currency.
So they had this move before even the African Union took it upon itself to have one single platform to do business. So people are saying, why aren't you having this? But they blame the French for undermining that.
So what is France doing in terms of undermining these countries as they try to cut the cord?
Well, what the critics say is that because of the power of CFA, which is known as the currency for French colonies, it is printed not only in they don't print it in these countries, they print it somewhere outside. In some instances they print it in Brazzaville and some countries in the Central African region.
But with the oversight of France.
And that is why they are saying if these CFA currencies cannot even be used in France, why are we using it in the first place? So these are some of the disgruntled opinions coming out of these French countries. And that is why you have some of these presidents calling for things to change. It remains to be seen if France will let things go, because Italy, for example, has come out sharply critical of France that it is taking billions of dollars out of Africa every year, and the natural resources in these Francophone countries are not benefiting the people, but benefiting the people of France. So these are some of the accusations and counter-accusations going on. It remains to be seen if they will be successful in pulling out or printing their own currency, because some attempts in the past have not yielded results.
But there's momentum this time around.
There appears to be a momentum.
Right. All right. So, Peter, another question coming in, and this time takes us back to Sudan. The question is, what is the update on the situation in Sudan and the expected change in the 2020 election? Basically, what is al-Bashir's situation in Sudan right now?
Well, the al-Bashir situation is a little confusing. One, people want al-Bashir to be taken to the International Criminal Court to be prosecuted for war crimes and crimes against humanity due to the alleged gross human rights violations in Darfur, for which he was indicted after the UN Security Council, although Sudan is not a signatory to the ICC, the Security Council recommended the ICC to investigate. After investigation, indictment was sent. The African Union decided not to cooperate because at that time Bashir was the president. Now he is no longer a president. Let's see how things unfold. People want him to be taken to the ICC to be prosecuted. Others are saying there's an independent judiciary in Sudan and that he should face the judicial system in Sudan. Some are also calling for him to be prosecuted for leading a coup d'etat against a legitimately elected president, for which he came to power. Right. So there are a lot of things going on. When the Prime Minister Hamdok was interviewed about the situation of Bashir, he said, well, Bashir needs to face justice first at home, and then people will decide whether it is prudent for him to be taken to the ICC to be prosecuted, because the ICC can only come in when the local
country
cannot really administer an independent judiciary system to prosecute people who have been accused of gross human rights violations or war crimes or crimes against humanity. The system in Sudan is saying, we have the capability to do that. Leave it
let us do it.
Yes.
Hamdok, we should mention, was in the U.S. with a couple of Sudanese leaders, and it's very interesting to hear him talk about this issue, because everybody wants to know what is happening with al-Bashir. We're running short of time, but Peter, we have a couple of questions that's still coming in on our Facebook Live. Again, if you're just joining us, this is Shaka Extra Time. I'm Jackson Vunganyi. That is Peter Clody. Peter is answering your questions as they come in. Peter, Mkesa Solomon asks, what kind of democracy are African countries practicing, especially taking the example of the many abuses happening in the country of Nigeria? This takes back us to the issue of Shore. We just, I mean, do you want to talk a little bit about that, and then we can move on to the next question?
A lot of African countries are embracing the tenet of democracy. And one thing that we should remind ourselves is that Western countries have been practicing democracy for a very long time. So in some cases, they have 100, 200, sometimes 300 years of practicing democracy. A lot of these African countries are embracing the tenets of democracy in the last 40 to 50 years, and they are experimenting with it. It will take a little bit of time for them to get there, but we are seeing hope. We have seen Senegal change hands, we've seen Ghana, we've seen Nigeria change hands from one political party to the other. Botswana is also a stable democracy, of course, South Africa and the likes. Now, in the case of Eswatini, the king said they are practicing monarchical democracy. It remains to be seen what that means. And we are trying to get him to speak to us.
I guess you should also mention that in some places, unfortunately, where we've seen progress over the past couple of years, we've seen a regression as much as, as recent as this year,
People have mentioned the issue of Tanzania, where they think when President Magufuli came, he has eroded
some of the gains made during the Chikwetes and others. And
has narrowed the political space. Of course, the supporters of the Chama Pinduzi, the CCM, are saying these are just mere figment of people's imagination, and that opposition leaders are allowed to freely operate without any hindrances. So it remains to be seen how things will go. But so far, so good, although the progress is not as expedited as people would think it should go.
Another question that is kind of, in a way, linked to that one from Muhammad Charles asks, do you think that Africa will ever become democratic without the intervention of the West? And America, I guess, specifically.
Well, it remains to be seen if people will present evidence of the West undermining democracy, because for all intents and purposes, people are supposed to be part of the democratic process. If you are supposed to go and vote, you're supposed to guard against your vote being mishandled or stolen, or people being bought to undermine the integrity of the polls, because you are supposed to protect it. You are part of the process. If you don't do it, then you don't accuse anybody of undermining it. A case, a point
basically, nobody should be a custodian of your own vote. You should be able
absolutely. When you vote, you stay there to ensure that the votes are counted properly by the presiders of the vote, and then you make sure that people report the accurate figures. So when figures are wanting, then you can say, something happened here. Then you can go to the legal process to have it redressed.
Let your vote count. Peter, we're coming almost to the end, and I want to get you to talk to our listeners and our viewers. You'll be hosting Straight Talk Africa this week, tomorrow. What are you going to be talking about?
Well, we'll be talking about the year of return. A lot of...
In Ghana, in your homeland.
Yes. A lot of African Americans and Africans in the diaspora are going to Ghana. They're looking at opportunities there. And it's 400 years of slavery, people taken from West Africa and other parts of Africa into slavery. So Ghana took this year as the 400 years for people to go back to and connect to where they came from. And there are other business opportunities that people are taking care of and want to invest, not only in Ghana, but other parts of Africa. So this is a very monumental year in the life of Africans in the diaspora, or African Americans in the diaspora. So we'll talk about the pros and cons.
That would be a very interesting show to watch. And with that, we come to the end of our show today. This has been Shaka Extra Time. I'm Jackson Vunganyi. Be sure to check out my show up front Sounds on VOA Wednesdays to Sunday. Peter's Nightline Africa Saturdays and Sundays. Check it out. You can follow me at Upfront Africa. You're at Peter Clotty. We'll catch you again right here next time. Goodbye, everyone.